Hello and welcome to The Table. I'm Tyler Mitchell, Discipleship Pastor at Fellowship West, and we're so glad you pulled up a chair today. Here at The Table, we believe that faith grows best in community, that some of the most meaningful conversations happen not just in pews or pulpits, but around tables. Each episode will share stories, reflections, and honest conversations about life, faith, and what it means to follow Jesus together. Whether you're part of our West family, just exploring faith, or somewhere in between, you have a seat here. Today, we will begin a special two-part episode walking us through the history of Fellowship West and how we have seen God's faithfulness from the very beginning. We will sit down with Pastor Matt and have some special conversations with people who have walked this journey with us in each step along the way. So grab a cup of coffee and let's have a conversation. Today's episode is a little different. It's not about one doctrine or one person's story, but the story of our whole church family. And like every great story, it is full of twists and turns and moments where God's hand was unmistakable. From a call in 2013 to plant a new church in Shawnee to the unexpected opportunity to replant Bonner Springs Baptist and become Fellowship West, from launching as an independent church in 2018 to starting our Legends campus in 2019, every step has been marked by God's provision and faithfulness. Along the way, we've seen him gather people, open doors we couldn't have imagined, and write a story that's still unfolding today. So join us as we sit down with Pastor Matt to look back, not just to remember where we've been, but to celebrate what God has done and dream about what he's still doing through Fellowship West. So Matt, can you take us back to 2013? How did you first sense God calling you to plant a church in Shawnee?
Well, in 2013, I was in Lake Charles, Louisiana, as a student pastor and teaching pastor, and I felt God really changing things within me. During that process, really the summer of 2013, my mom got a diagnosis of cancer. For me, that changed really everything.
Yeah.
From where I was honestly really happy in Louisiana, I loved my church, I loved my people, but I began to feel this stirring to be closer to my family, and also knowing that God had called me to something beyond just what I was doing there in my current church.
Yeah.
And so my wife and I, we just began to pray, God, if it be your will, move us back up to Kansas City. Within a matter of weeks or a couple months, Pastor Steve Dighton, who was my pastor when I was saved, and he mentored me and had continued to pour into me and develop me for the entirety since I was saved in the year 2000, he called and asked if I would be interested in moving back up to Kansas City and planting a church. For me, this was just an incredible answer to prayer and how quickly God moved. And in some ways, I think it took my mom getting sick for me to be willing to leave the comfort of where I was and go to the unknown. But we embraced that really with a lot of excitement. Within a matter of weeks of Pastor Steve calling and giving me the invitation, my wife Megan and I flew up to Kansas City. We met with him. We drove around Kansas City. Initially, he drove us through Brookside and Waldo and some other places and talked about planting churches over there. And then at one point, we even drove out toward the Legends and talked about over there. But then by the time I finally moved to Kansas City and had my first day, which was December 1st of 2013, the shift had focused to Western Shawnee. We had a core team meeting on that night and began to build something there. But it was kind of fun to watch as God moved and orchestrated things to get my focus and my willingness ready to be up here to plant the church.
Yeah. So what was your vision for the church in those early days?
Well, in the early days, really just kind of praying and searching for what God would want us to be. He really just gave me a vision that became our mission statement to share Jesus, disciple believers, and love people. To take a group of people and to go out and just begin to build the kingdom of God. And so initially, I was placed in a specific small group there at Lenexa Baptist, where we were put there for the purpose of recruiting a core team that would go with us and join us on mission.
Right.
And God really gave us some sweet friendships out of that group and really an incredible core team to begin the church planting journey.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about the process of those early days where you don't have a location, you've been called up here to plant this church. Talk to me about that stage of this journey.
Those were some really hard days, if I'm really honest. I moved up here as somebody who had never planted a church, gathered a core team of people that I was really beginning to love. Really felt like God gave me a vision for that kind of Western Shawnee K7 corridor area. And the majority of our core team were all from that area. And then over a period of months, even as we began having weekly worship service meetings in the basement of Lenexa Baptist, myself and Pastor Steve, oftentimes together and oftentimes separate, would just drive through the entire community, every street, looking for a place to meet.
Yeah.
And all these various places that we called, nobody would rent to us. The school system turned us down there for a little while. And there's a church that we were in talks with about possibly using their facility. And they said yes. And then they changed their mind and said no. And businesses that we tried renting, they all ended up turning us down and oftentimes telling us that churches are actually bad for business because they only bring in people one day a week. And we tried sharing with them, well, if you're doing it right, people are here more than one day a week, but it was kind of frustrating to not have a place. And then as we went on, week after week and month after month, every Sunday I was answering questions from people. Where are we going?
Yeah.
Where is our location? When are we going to launch out? And I kind of got to the place where each Sunday I couldn't wait to see my people and preach. But in some ways I kind of dreaded it because I knew the questions were coming.
Sure.
And I did not have an answer.
Yeah. So what was it like building that core team?
Honestly, it was a lot of fun. It was incredible to be able to just go and to share a mission with these people. And at that point, we were targeting zip code 66226 was kind of our main target zip code. And just sharing with them the ways in which we were going to try to love that community. And we did some various service events within that community of working in the parks and helping a school and working and serving alongside of these people while also training for what it would look like to serve together and to have Sunday mornings and to be on mission. And it really was an exciting time with that core team of building relationships and camaraderie, and how quickly it went from being these people that I didn't really know that well to being people that I was living in such close community with that really began to feel like family.
Yeah, that's awesome. Were there moments in those early days when you doubted or wondered if this whole thing would even work?
Oh my gosh, yes. I remember being there in my house and sitting and talking with my wife and starting to doubt myself and to question, did we mishear God? When we are going months of having no location to meet in, it became hard.
Sure.
And I began to doubt, did I mishear God? What was I wrong? What was my motivation off?
Yeah.
But then my wife and I had to keep going back to, no, we prayed for this and God opened doors and we would keep going back to what we knew was true. And what we knew was that we could think back to the moment when God called us and we had no doubt.
Yeah.
And so for us, while it was hard and it was frustrating, we just kept pressing on in faith, knowing that in God's timing, He would reveal to us His will. In that moment, and still today, a verse I would regularly go back to was 1 Corinthians 2:9 that says, what no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived, what God has in store for those who love Him.
Yeah.
And so we kind of kept going back to and holding on to this idea that God had something for us. He called us.
Right.
And so that meant that He had a plan for our being here. He had given us a core team that had bought really full into the mission. And so for us, our responsibility was simply to be faithful and to know that right now we haven't seen it. We might not have heard about it. We might not even be able to conceive what God has for us next. And which, looking at where we are now, there's no way we could have conceived of what God would do.
Yeah.
But we knew that if we walked forward in faith and just prayed and trusted and were obedient and pursued holiness, that God would eventually reveal His will to us. And He did that in a pretty significant way.
Yeah. So looking back, how do you feel like those challenges in the early days prepared us as a church for what came next?
I feel like in a lot of ways, our story has often been that we get to these great kind of watershed moments, these crescendo moments of our church where we've grown to a point where we have no space or whatever it may be. And then we're trying to figure out what to do and what's next. And the amazing thing is that every single time God shows up, and he not only provides a way, but he provides a way that then looking back at the journey to get there, it then becomes clear all the steps that he was preparing us for to get to that moment. And so for me, each of these watershed moments that we've been in as a church now since, that December 1st, 2013, all it's done is give me greater and greater confidence to always walk forward in faith and to trust that God will be faithful now because we have seen him be faithful in the past. And so my responsibility is to pray fervently, to walk forward in faith, to preach the word, to love our people well, and to just lead by trusting.
Yeah. When you're a part of a brand new church plant, there's no guarantee of where you'll meet, who will show up, or how it will all work out. But for this group of people, the call to join Pastor Matt on the journey was worth the risk. Here's what it was like to be a part of the very first core team of Fellowship West.
So my name is Mike Caponeri, and I'm here with my wife, Chrisanne Caponeri, and we've been really with Fellowship West since the beginning, I guess since 2014 or so when we first met Matt and Megan.
Hi, my name is Mandy Jones, and I was part of the core team that came over from Lenexa Baptist Church.
How did you first hear about the vision to plant what would become Fellowship West?
I don't remember officially, but Matt and Megan joined our Sunday school class at Lenexa Baptist. And Megan and I ended up in a lot of the same circles, different Bible studies and stuff. And so we came to know about it that way. I kind of teased them that they were spies in our Sunday school class because so many people from that class came over.
What were some of the things that drew you to be a part of the core team?
The location was going to be on the side of town closer to our house, which sounded appealing that it would be closer to the community we were living in, and just an opportunity to be a part of growth and something new. We had gotten to know Matt and Megan a little bit, and we were excited for the vision that they had presented.
What were some of your thoughts as this idea of being a part of a church plant? What were some of your original thoughts as you began kind of considering that as a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was uncharted territory. I was saved when I was 27, so I was still, at least in my mind, not as mature when it comes to my walk with the Lord. So the concept of a church plant was just foreign to me. I didn't really know what that meant. But in the year plus that we had been in Kansas City, we moved here from the Washington, D.C. area. We had been looking for churches like LBC and came to know Matt and Megan. And, we were also at the same time looking for a place to live. We were just renting. So we had been looking in Western Shawnee, actually, for homes. And then when Matt and Megan, Matt started talking about the idea of Fellowship Shawnee. And I think from our perspective, it was well, we really, believe that God is kind of pointing us in a direction. So it just felt like we were being pointed in that direction, if that makes sense.
I felt like we came because we felt like God called us to do it, because honestly, I didn't want to go because we had just gotten settled at LBC because it's like a big church and it takes time to meet people. And I felt like it was finally at a point where we would walk through the hallways and we knew people and we were involved. Yeah. So I even told somebody, I kind of feel like I'm being called to go to Africa, but it's just to Shawnee.
What were some of the early challenges or moments of uncertainty during those initial months, especially before you found the location that would eventually become the home of Fellowship West?
The whole process felt uncertain to me because I felt very comfortable where we were, and initially I was kind of hesitant for us to take that step as a family, but JJ really felt that God was leading our family to just go after what God was doing, and not knowing where we were going to be was definitely an unknown and a little bit of a concern, but God just continued to faithfully affirm that this is what he wanted for us, and eventually, brought about a location for us to start doing the work.
Well, honestly, for me, I think it really was the location. So, prior to having that, logistically, we were meeting in the basement of LBC and, kind of felt like we were squatting, but we were able to get through that. But yeah, there was just, of course, uncertainty about, okay, physically, where are we going to be eventually? So I think just like the logistics piece, it never felt, and LBC is great, don't get me wrong, it's not meant at all to come across as critical, but, it's just like not a place of our own. Yeah. So that was...
Well, all of the closed doors in Shawnee were very discouraging. Do you remember?
Yeah, the schools.
It would be like, okay, this place seems really promising. We've had good conversations.
Yeah.
And then
it's like one after
something
another
would happen. And then it was really surprising and discouraging too to even have our public school say you can't be in here. That was interesting.
What were some of the ways that you saw God kind of moving in the midst of that uncertainty that gave you some peace, even in the midst of not knowing exactly where you were going to be and what that launch was going to look like?
Not knowing where you're going is always difficult.
Sure.
But when you take on these new opportunities, you do know that, if God's hand is in it, He's going to provide a place for you. And so even though the doors kept shutting and every week Matt would share, I'm searching here and I'm searching there and we have a lead on this and it sounds exciting, but then God would shut the door, it still felt peaceful in the uncertainty because we could see that His hand was leading it.
Great. What was it like from the core team perspective whenever you found out that you had a location that we were going to be replanting Bonner Springs Baptist Church? Talk to me about your experience through that process of finding out that news, the renovations and the replant process, and then the launching finally with here in Bonner Springs.
I was very hesitant initially because it wasn't where I thought it was going to be.
Sure.
And the facilities weren't honestly what I wanted them to be. And so that felt different.
Yeah.
But I remember going to a picnic that we held with both groups coming together. It was one of our first, get to know you events. Mm-hmm. And I just remember how loving, how generous, how accepting and ready to come together both groups of people were. And that just was God's hand being this is where you need to be.
Yeah.
God wants us in this community. He wants us with these people, and He wants us to move forward with the vision that He has here.
Yeah.
So while it felt scary and maybe not exactly what I was thinking, it was very clear that was the right thing.
I mean, for me, I was a little bit concerned about the two groups coming together, and especially kind of from a historical perspective. When you think about territory, I mean, this church has been here, are the two groups gonna, mesh and get along? I never forget downstairs painting at Fellowship, what's become Fellowship West here in Bonner, and I ended up painting next to this guy and started making conversation with, and just really hit it off. And it turned out it was Dave Erickson. I didn't know who he was from it was the first time I met him, but it was such a good impression. I mean, we just talked about stuff in general, just life, kids, and I remember I was like, okay, if this guy is anyway representative of Bonner, this is going to be good, because he was just such a good dude.
That was more positive than me. I had my red cup that said Fellowship Shawnee, and I was pumped for that. And I was like, oh, I'm always late. So just to be even further, it was I don't know. And we're not from here, so I didn't really know Bonner Springs at all.
What was it that ultimately ended up kind of selling you on the vision of this being up here and transitioning to Fellowship West instead of Fellowship Shawnee?
It's just that reminder you have to get uncomfortable sometimes, because LBC was comfortable and Shawnee was even just going to Shawnee, I wasn't really enthusiastic about. So that was part of the situation. It wasn't it was just going further and even to a different place. So all of that uncertainty existed. But at the end of the day, we felt that God called us to do this. And so even if I was hesitant, that was less important.
By the time you launched Fellowship West here in Bonner, do you feel like there were still two separate congregations, or do you feel like there really was a sense of unity and family amongst the two former groups?
I feel like there was definitely a unity and a sense of community together. I just remember Annette grabbing Elise from me on our very first time we met, and just felt like somebody I had known forever. Meeting the people that had already been here, you really couldn't tell who came and who was already here. We were all, just one body almost immediately.
Yeah, I always felt that there was that sense of unity, and maybe those concerns, apprehensions that I had just really weren't borne out. Give a lot of credit to Matt and the leadership team about being intentional with events, picnics. I remember some of those early things like that, just social engagement. So we got to know each other in a more laid back setting. But by the time we actually, came together, and you get to know people through some of those picnics and stuff that we did prior. But really it did feel, from my perspective, to be honest, quite seamless, at least my perspective on it.
Yeah, no, I agree. It never felt like an us versus them mentality. It was like we were all on board together.
Was there a moment when you really sensed God's presence or confirmation that you were a part of something bigger than yourself?
Yeah, for me, it would be when the community groups came together, where Matt asked me if I would lead a community group. And I had never done that before. And again, not, being a relatively new believer, it felt like kind of a big responsibility. And we were going to host in our home, which we did for the first couple of years. And we had a lot of families, couples come. And even, I remember when Chrisanne and Megan were pregnant together with Samuel and Ace. And I grew so much in my relationship with the Lord through that process.
So when we had our first, it was our launch service. And I'm kind of a nerd in this, maybe, but I thought it was super cool that we had 303 people in attendance, and that's our address.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool.
I can't believe you remember that.
I remember that stuck out to me because I was in that moment I was like, well, that's a God thing. That's a very random number, and just so happens the number of people that showed up today is also our address, 303 South Bluegrass Drive. Yeah.
So after we had merged with Bonner Springs Baptist and started doing the work together in the community, I really felt God's hand on our family, just that complete peace that this is where He wanted us, that we were in a position to, do hard things, like stepping up in the leadership way that maybe we had not previously, that felt scary or big. But God prepared us. God gave us what we needed in those times to minister to people that maybe we hadn't had an opportunity to minister to previously. And I felt like that was confirmation that while this experience felt scary and maybe uncomfortable and not to my preferences, that each step that we took was growth.
Yeah.
And, just confirmation that that's what He wanted us to do.
How did being a part of the core team shape your faith personally?
I've been teaching Sunday school now with Phil, What a Guy Jones, for 7 or 8 years or something like that, the 3rd to 5th grade boys. But yeah, that was the Lord and the Holy Spirit just working through me. So that was, I think an outgrowth of really, coming to church, the community groups, all of it coming together. So that's an example for me.
I think for me, something that comes to mind is just in the beginning, helping with the kids ministry, running it and organizing the curriculum and doing all the scheduling and trying to get teachers to volunteer and to show up and all of those things. It was such a great opportunity for me to be able to serve in that way. I was staying at home at that time, so I had more time to do something like that. But just to be a part of the beginning of the kids ministry was really awesome.
It definitely stretched me outside of my comfort zone. We were able to pretty quickly take a leadership role in leading an adult fellowship group on Sunday mornings, which felt a little scary, but again, like, God fully equipped us with what we needed to get that up and running, and really provided people in our own small group as well as people in that Sunday morning fellowship group that mentored, encouraged, supported, and then, allowed us that chance to give back and invest.
Looking back, how did you see God provide people, resources, or encouragement when you needed it most?
I feel like being connected to the body is the only way to receive those things. So being connected when I was having a hard time parenting, or when I was struggling with friendships, or when, we were adjusting to this shift in our church family, like praying and asking God to bring about those things for us. He was always so faithful to do that.
Yeah.
Our community group that we first started with was just such a great group of people who were like-minded and walking the same stage of life as us, and that was so valuable from the very beginning. And then leading into the other ministries that we eventually launched, like God faithfully brought about moms groups, and He faithfully brought about kids ministry, and He faithfully brought about all the things that we needed.
I mean, just for me, the people that we've come to know and meet through going to church here, like I mentioned Phil a moment ago, I've become pretty good friends with him. But it's been, cool just getting to, I guess, maybe opening up a different door into more Christian friends, like just that fellowship aspect. And
yeah, I think there's so many authentic people at our church. I know we've experienced a lot of encouragement, even just when Mike is gone on hurricane travel for months at a time, and people helping me keep some sort of sanity. But I've always thought that about our church, that there are just real lovers of Jesus. I hear that stat about, and sadly, that only 10% of people who actually claim to be Christians are true Bible-believing disciples. And I'm like, are all 10% at our church?
yeah.
Because, they're real.
So eventually we found a location. Matt, can you tell us a little bit about how this opportunity with Bonner Springs Baptist Church first came on your radar?
So, we'd had these many months not finding a location, and feeling like there really were no options there in that Western Shawnee region. And one day, Pastor Steve Dighton calls and tells me about a phone call he'd received from just an incredible man of God, David Erickson, who's since gone to be with Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so that he called and talked about the possibility of our church and their church merging. What David shared was that he had heard me preach at Lenexa Baptist, and that if we would be willing to shift our focus from Western Shawnee to Bonner Springs, that they would give us everything they had debt free, and allow us to replant there. And I would like to say that I had a great God moment and a great step of obedience, and just said, yes, absolutely, let's do this. But initially, my response was a no way. Yeah. I had some friends and seen some people who had replanted dying churches where it didn't go well for them, where those who were left said they wanted change but really didn't want change, and that kind of scared me. And then there was also this core team from Western Shawnee that I deeply loved.
Sure.
That I was terrified to go to them and say, hey, for months I've been giving you this vision, and now it's going to shift, and that scared me. And so I said no. Steve Dighton let me have my moment of saying no. And then a week or so later, he came back to me after I'd had some time to pray and think, and he said, hey, Matt, I really think you ought to pray about this and consider it. And Pastor Steve, he is one of those men that his word is always gold to me. Mm-hmm. And when he told me that I should pray about it and consider it, I took that as a serious thing I should do.
Sure.
And so my wife and I, we began to pray and seek God's will on it. And as we did, my heart really softened to the idea.
Mm.
But that didn't change still the slight fear aspect that I had with it, you know. And
Yeah.
I'm never going to forget after I had agreed to do it, that Sunday morning when I had to get up after I preached and tell my core team that we're no longer going to Western Shawnee, but we're going to pivot. We're going to cross the river into a different county. And granted, it was only, I think, 1.8 or 1.9 miles away.
Sure.
But it felt like a monumental shift in so many ways,
Yeah.
especially from a fresh plant to a replant and all the things. And man, I remember thinking, this is my last time that these people will be my friends. They're all going to hate me. They're going to boo me off stage. I'm going to have to leave alone and miserable. And just about every single person that was there with us that day supported us, stayed with us through that transition, and then became a key part of shifting from Fellowship Shawnee as a church plant to what became Fellowship West as a replant.
Right.
And I'm still so humbled and honored by the way that all of that worked out.
Yeah.
And in that people were willing to believe in the mission so much that even when that big of a shift came, that they stuck with us.
Right.
And I will forever be grateful for that. And I will never forget how terrified I was on that morning, but how gracious God was also to us on that morning.
Yeah. What were some of the challenges that you were kind of anticipating with that shift of realizing that it was going to change from a fresh plant to a replant?
Well, generally speaking, it seems like there's a reason why churches are dying. Generally speaking, it doesn't seem that really healthy churches that are doing things well are losing members and struggling and just falling apart. And, for me, like I knew they were a GARB church and not Southern Baptist. And I knew that they had been more conservative in their methodology. I knew that me preaching out of a different version of the Bible would be a big deal, that changing the music style would be a big deal, that getting rid of their broken pews and their purplish red carpet would be a big deal. And I knew that it would be a big shift. And my fear was that this might be a people who cared more about their preferences than the gospel, and that it was just going to be ugly. And that was like my really big fear walking into this, and how would these changes and these pretty monumental shifts for them be received?
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about this transition, the blending of the existing congregation with the new core team, and that process of really uniting to become what is now our West family.
What I love is that all the fears that I had were never realized. I was worried that the church was dying because what was left was a group of people who cared more about preferences than the gospel.
Yeah.
And the reality is, a pastor before me, Pastor Bud Jones, he did a fantastic job of kind of running off all the people who cared more about their preferences than the gospel.
Yeah.
And the people left at Bonner Springs Baptist were honestly some of the kindest, most loving, gospel-centered people I've ever encountered in ministry. And the decision they made to sign everything over, I've always called a heroic decision. It's hard to allow what you've been a part of for decades, some families being in the church for generations, to shut down and to become something new.
Yeah.
But they were willing, most of them, to embrace that change. Over that summer, the building had fallen into disrepair over the years, as they hadn't had the money to really keep it up. We just spent time working on it side by side. Our core team that I had formed for Shawnee and the people from Bonner Springs Baptist, we worked to scrape walls and paint walls and rip out pews and rip up carpet and patch holes and clean out closets that had 30 years of clutter in them. And there is something sweet about working side by side with people for a common mission. And as you do, you're hearing their stories, you're You're learning about their families, and you're beginning to grow a relationship and a love for one another.
Right.
And the incredible thing is that we started these renovations, I believe, in the end of June, around there, 2014. And then we launched middle of August 2014. And in that short 6 to 7 week window, it really went from being two separate groups to, by the time we launched on launch Sunday, it did not feel like two separate groups. People weren't sitting on opposite sides of the aisles, that they weren't like segregated in different places, but our people were serving in the same rooms, greeting at the same front doors, sitting in the same rows, worshiping the same God. And from day one, it did not feel like a Fellowship Shawnee and a Bonner Springs Baptist group. But because we had people from both groups that were so gospel focused and so open minded, that it was a West family from day one, which for me as the pastor, it's made it about the easiest thing and transition ever could have been.
Yeah, that's awesome. Can you share a specific moment from that season when you could sense that God's hand was at work here, where you're like, hey, this is something special that I'm getting to be a part of?
Yeah, I remember there was a time, it was 6 to 8 weeks after we launched, and there was an opportunity for an outdoor kind of service and baptism along with Lenexa Baptist, and I think one of the other kind of replants they had done, or two other replants they had done, were going to be there. And there was an opportunity to baptize, and we had really been making some pretty big evangelistic pushes. And we got to baptize, I can't remember, 10, 11, 12 people. It was some ridiculous number, it's like these 6 to 8 weeks in or so. And I remember just being in awe that we had gone from 6 months earlier, no place to meet, having fear. God, did I hear you wrong? To here I was pastoring a replant in a different city, in a revitalized and rebuilt physically church, where people were being saved regularly, baptized, and then getting to baptize this mass of people. And then to have some of the people from Bonner Springs Baptist who were there at that baptism service, who told me afterwards they had doubts about what we were doing, but seeing the lives change and the people saved, that they were all in.
Yeah.
I remember going home really excited from that night at the lake and baptizing, and thinking, man, like, we are really a part of something special.
Yeah, that's awesome. Looking back at this season, during the first couple years of this replant, what did God teach you about his timing and his provision?
He taught me that his timing and his provision is rarely in line with what I think his timing ought to be. So often, I feel like in the history of our church, we saw there in the beginning that I make my plans. And I strategize, and man, I love to plan. I love to strategize. I'm a big vision person, but what I've learned is that I need to really be flexible, which is not in my nature. I think people who know me well will say that flexibility is not one of my normal traits. I tend to by nature be a little more structured and rigid. But God is regularly bringing me out of my comfort zone to trust him. And he seems to regularly bring me and our church to these moments where we are forced to rely on his provision and his timing. And every time we do, and we just have this, Lord, I don't sense you, feel you, hear you in this moment. I don't see what's going on. It's like the Psalms 13 moment.
Yeah.
But as David says in verses 7 and 8, but I will continue to trust in your unfailing love. And I think that's one of the things that God really has shown me there in those first months and couple of years, what was just how God calls us to trust him, even when we don't see it, and that he's working and moving. And we've seen such incredible fruit from that.
Yeah. For the congregation at Bonner Springs Baptist, the idea of partnering with a young church plant brought both excitement and uncertainty. It meant embracing change and stepping into something new. Here's how some of those members remember the season when Fellowship West was born in their building.
My name is Angie Bardwell. I was original member, I guess you would say, of Bonner Springs Baptist Church. Now I've been a longtime member of Fellowship West.
My name is Reba Erickson, and I was a part of the Bonner Springs Baptist Church that merged with Fellowship West, and so thankful for that.
How did you first hear about the vision to plant what would become Fellowship West?
So it was back in 2014, probably like the end of 2013. My late husband, David, was a deacon with Bonner Springs Baptist Church.
Mm.
And they had been kind of going through the process of trying to make some changes. Our attendance was getting pretty low. Our members, like regular members, I think we were down to maybe like 50 people or something. And so he was part of the deacon board trying to just kind of look into how we could spark some life into the church, how we could start growing. And he sort of just had this idea out of the blue. We had a relationship with people from Lenexa Baptist Church.
Right.
And David just had the idea one day. He said, I think I'm going to email Pastor Steve and ask him if he would want to plant a church and make a campus in Bonner Springs. And I honestly looked at him and was like, okay, yeah, that's not going to work. You're crazy. And he's like, no, he's like, I just really feel like, they had been kind of spinning their wheels, and we saw how great the Greenwood campus was doing and growing. And so he's like, I'm just going to reach out to him and I'm going to see what happens. And so he did. It was probably February, March of 2014. And so that was really sort of the first thoughts we started having about the merger.
And do you recall what the initial response and kind of reaction was whenever he first reached out to Pastor Steve?
Well, surprisingly, he was like, okay, yeah, this might work. Like, let me talk to some people, let me pray about this, let me get back to you. So he did within, just like a few weeks, and they decided to set up a meeting between Pastor Steve and some of the people from LBC, met with our deacons and kind of like started the process.
What was your initial reaction when David first kind of presented this idea to you?
Oh, I was very excited.
Okay.
Very excited because it was the first thing that we'd come up with that we thought actually might work.
I was really like, I'm like, they're not going to want to come across the river. We're just little old Bonner Springs Baptist Church. Like, I was just really kind of, well, okay, like, you can try, but, God has other plans.
So that summer, we kind of shut down the campus here while renovations were happening. What was that season of life like, where you're in this transition process, you haven't fully launched the campus, these two groups of people are starting to merge, working alongside each other? Tell me a little bit about that season.
Well, I specifically remember the first time that Pastor Steve and Bill Shiflett, who leads worship, kind of their first encounter with our group here at Bonner Springs. And Pastor Steve came to preach and Bill came to lead worship. And this was before we voted. It was, pretty early on. And I was really nervous on how things would be received. There was still a lot of people excited for it, but then people who were really like, I don't know about this. And, I just really didn't know how it was going to go.
Right.
And I think it was a Sunday evening. They came over, Pastor Steve preached, Bill led worship. And from the moment it started, I could feel God's presence and God moving. And there was just this peace. It was just this really great time of fellowship. And I just really felt like, okay, God is going to do something big here.
Yeah.
And up until that point, I had just been real hesitant, nervous about how things would receive. He put everybody at ease. And it was just a really great time of fellowship. And then as we started to come together and started to, have work days and start to make the changes after we had officially voted, that was really a great time of sort of bonding for everybody, working alongside people, getting to know them. It was just a really sweet time that I look back on. That was just, everybody just felt like we're part of something great that's happening. You know, we were all on the same page. We were excited. We were on board. Like, you know, God is going to do some great things.
Yeah, that's cool.
My big concern and only concern when we merged was for my husband, who's ill with Parkinson's and basically in a wheelchair. His life had revolved around Bonner Springs Baptist Church. I wanted to make sure that he was comfortable, that he was cared about, and that he was a part of what was happening. So when we went over to Lenexa Baptist a couple of weeks, we had church over there while this building was being renovated. The first morning of that, Pastor Matt called me personally to tell me what door to bring Jim to so that people could help get him into the building. And I thought that was above and beyond, and it just concreted in my mind that Pastor Matt loved everyone.
What was it like to see a new group of people with a different or fresh vision kind of come in and replant what you guys have been a part of for a long time?
It was such a wonderful feeling to be a part of. The excitement among everyone, all of the people involved, that things were going to be happening here in Bonner Springs again, that the church was going to be thriving, that it was going to be a place where people could actually come and learn about their Lord.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's just really refreshing and like exciting and just kind of a new take on things and just a new way of looking at things, excited about just like the potential and what we could possibly do together was just really, really just exciting.
Were there any challenges that you felt like we had to navigate during that transition?
I don't remember any, but probably there were a few that I just wasn't aware of. I'm a very positive person, so to me, I just went with everything that I felt God was leading us to.
Well, change is hard.
Sure.
For anybody, even when you know it's good. So I think there were a lot of preconceived notions on both ends, on our part at Bonner and then people from LBC also. We were sort of set in our ways. You know, we've been doing this same thing the same way for 40 years. So it was a pretty big change coming. And then, of course, the people who were a part of Fellowship Shawnee, it was also a big change for them. They were expecting to have a campus in Shawnee, and now this a whole different place they're going to, and a whole different plan. But the best plan, because it was God's plan, and they even had Fellowship West or Fellowship Shawnee cups, so they were all ready to go.
By the time that Fellowship West officially launched in August of 2014, do you feel like there was still kind of these two competing groups, or do you feel like there was more of a sense of unity and family from kind of the get-go?
Oh no, I believe it blended. I believe that it was a transition that most people and most churches can't even dream of.
Yeah.
So I don't think there was. Our fellowship group that we signed up for immediately is going on 11 years. It's been a combination of everybody from the beginning.
I definitely think there was unity from the get-go. And I think it was from those early days of working side by side, just getting to know people and kind of those kind of like walls and sort of preconceived notions started to come down, and as we all started to get to know each other and to realize like, hey, we all want the same thing,
What do you think played into that, the blending of the two instead of there being these two kind of competing groups?
Well, I believe that it was because each group was really wanting something to happen for the Lord. They wanted to make this a good transition. They wanted it to be where people could feel comfortable with each other. They were anxious to get to know each other and to be a part of each other's lives.
What has God taught you through the transformation of your church community?
Well, it's about timing for me. God has shown me in His way that His timing is always perfect. Sometimes I didn't see it right away, didn't understand it right away. Sometimes I will never understand all of it. But I know that His timing is always perfect. I believe that. and I always will.
So a couple of things. I think it really showed me that it's really about the church as a whole, the church body as a whole. It's not one building. It's not one congregation.
Right.
It's about the body of believers as a whole, and our common goal is to glorify God and to share Jesus and disciple believers and love people. And it didn't matter where we were from, what our backgrounds were. It was really about having that common goal in mind.
Was there a specific moment that you can think of from those first couple months after Fellowship West launched, once Matt was here, where you really began to recognize that like God's hand was clearly evidently in this and you were a part of something really special?
Yeah, I think starting with our official launch Sunday, and there was like over 300 people, and like it just brought me to tears to see the auditorium just completely full and standing room only.
Yeah.
And it was just such an encouragement. And now I can really look back and see how God really is in yesterday, today, and tomorrow all at once and all the time. And I can look back now and see how his plan came together.
Sure.
All the way back in 2004, David and I left Bonner Springs Baptist Church and went to LBC for 3 years.
Right.
And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to change. I was comfortable where I was. Right. And I kind of dug in my heels and I was like, well, no, I don't want to really go. We went and it was great. I grew, we both grew spiritually, our kids. And then 3 years later, we came back to Bonner Springs Baptist Church because his health was not good, and David felt like we needed to be back around family.
Sure.
And again, I didn't want to go. I was comfortable. I was set in my ways.
Yeah.
But we did. We came back. And now I look back and I think that was part of the purpose for this.
Yeah, because it was during that season where you were LBC that you formed some of those connections. Yeah, it paved the way for those connections to then reach out and have that contact that ultimately led to where we're at now.
Yeah. And when you're in the moment, it's really hard to understand, well, why this, why that. And now, several years removed from that, I'm like, oh, that's what God was doing,
That's really cool.
And to see how we've grown and the relationships that have come of it is it's just really cool to be a part of.
How have you seen new life spiritually and relationally since Fellowship West was born?
In my own life, personally, it has brought me much closer to the Lord through my spending more time in my devotions in the morning, my prayer time. I believe that we have a Bible-based message every Sunday morning that always sends me home with thoughts and things that I want to pray about and that I know I need to hear. So I just believe I see that happening in so many different people that I know. I'm involved in several groups. I see it in those groups. I see their care for each other, their love for each other, how they're growing in their own personal life with the Lord.
I think one of the biggest things that I have seen over the last 11 years is seeing the kids that grew up as in Fellowship West, becoming adults, being saved, baptized, still coming to church, serving in church, still following the Lord, now bringing their kids to church.
Yeah.
Like,
that's cool.
That's really, really cool to see.
Yeah. We're beginning to see some generational lineage happening within our church.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. Speaking on the relationship part, coming together and growing and meeting new people and growing, but I've seen so many other people just make so many connections with other people.
Yeah.
And, whether it be through the community groups or fellowship groups or whatever, just like doing life with people.
Right.
And just walking through, now it's been 11 years, walking through the highest of high mountaintop experiences and celebrating with everybody.
Sure.
But also walking through those deep valleys of sorrow too. And
Sure.
just so thankful to have so many people to share that with and walk through with.
David obviously got to see the first 5 or so years of Fellowship West's existence. What do you think he would think of where we're at now and what God has continued to do over the last 5 years?
He would be so excited. He was so excited. He did get to see the Legends Campus, the beginnings of that.
Mm-hmm.
He would be so excited that we have a podcast. But I also know that he would not say that he had anything to do with it. I feel like it's part of his legacy.
Absolutely. You can't, in my opinion, you can't tell the story of Fellowship West without mentioning David Erickson.
Yeah. But I feel like he would not want to take any credit for it. And he's right. He didn't do it. God did it.
Yeah.
But he was faithful and he listened to God's prompting him and was played an integral role in the start of things. And he would be he loved coming to youth group on Wednesday nights and seeing it just like start to be like bursting at the seams. And just, he loved the worship and just talking to people every Sunday. And I think he would just be so excited to see how much we keep growing and how much we are reaching people with the gospel and reaching the community and bringing people in and loving on them and serving. And I know he would just love it.
Yeah. And that's where we'll leave off with part 1 of the story. At the point where God had brought together a faithful core team, opened the door to merge with Bonner Springs Baptist, and planted the seeds for what was becoming Fellowship West. It's a reminder that every step along the way was not just about finding a building or forming a congregation. It was about God building his church and shaping us for what was coming next. But what happens when a church steps out from the safety of being a campus and becomes fully independent? And how do you take the bold step of multiplying into 2 campuses in just 1 year? That's where we'll pick things up for part 2. Don't miss it. Thank you for joining us today at The Table. We hope this conversation has been meaningful to you and that you feel encouraged in your journey of faith. If you'd like to stay connected, be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. And be sure to join us in person. For more information about Sunday service times and locations, head to our website, fellowshipwest.com. If something from today's conversation resonated with you, share it with a friend or leave us a review because everyone has a seat at the table. Until next time, remember, you are loved and there's always a place for you here. Take care and we'll see you again soon.